Hey you guys, I need to make a new spline jig for my table saw because the old jig does not fit my new table, and I figured I will show you how I make my spline jig. Now splines, not only it makes your project more beautiful, but also provides strength to your miter joints. You don't need to make one, you can buy a spline jig. I do have two of them. I have this one from Rockler. And this one it's meant for the router table, and I use this one with a straight bit, and also I use it with the dovetail bit. I'll put a link to it in the description below if you're interested in that one. Now recently I also purchased this one from Woodworker. It's a solid piece of equipment. However, I do not like it. It's heavy, it takes a lot of space to store. It rides against the fence, and if you just go a little bit off and stuff, you have to make sure that these things don't fall into the miter tracks. And I just find it kind of clunky and not so easy to use, so I'm going to make my own jig. Now before we start with the build, I would like to announce that finally my website is public now, so if you would like to support this channel, please consider going to www.skylarewing.store, and you can purchase some of the stuff that I have made, and that will just help the channel. Now let's go into the build. All right, I will start with this piece of plywood. Let's see, this is about 13¼ inches by about 9 inches. You can make it a little bit smaller. I find this size works perfectly. And I already started marking some stuff. I will tell you what I marked. I'll mark over it with the marker just so you can see it better. So first I found the middle of my board, and I put a line like this. I hope you can see that. Then I measured about, let's see, what did I measure here? I measured 1 inch from the bottom of the jig, and I made a line that goes this way. Oops. Something like that. I do have two pieces of Baltic birch plywood. I use Baltic birch for this. It's just regular, whatever, cheap plywood for the other parts. But for this one, I wanted to have a little bit better quality because I will be drilling holes into the edge of it. So these guys will have to sit kind of like this at a 45-degree angle. So I'm using a square, and what I did, I measured, let's see how I measured here. From the center, I measured 1 inch on each side, and that's where I will start my line. I put my square against it, and make some lines at 45. All right. So now if we take a triangle and put this like this, you will see it is perfect 90 degrees over here. So that is good. Now I will be, when I glue these pieces of plywood, I want to make sure the corner that is the lowest is going to go on this intersection here between the 45 and this line. So for now, I'm just going to put it against it, kind of like the way it would go. And I'm going to mark on the other side of the plywood, just so I know where to pre-drill. So I'll do the same thing here. Put it against and mark it. So now I know this is where those pieces are going to go. So what I need to do now is I will go to the drill press and I will pre-drill 2 holes, something like this. So I'm gonna go do that. So this is what we have so far. Now I am going to glue these pieces of plywood. Let me make sure they're the same, and they are the same size. For the size of these pieces, they are almost 4 inches by 3.5. So I'm going to use some CA glue and glue these guys just like this. And I'll make sure that the bottom corner is right at the intersection of those two lines. So let's do that. Now I'm gonna go and drive some screws right in the back. I do have to countersink these guys, so I will countersink them and then drive some 1.25 inch screws. Now this jig is going to ride on the fence, so we need to make a little fence saddle. The way I will do that, I have a piece of plywood here that I cut just a little bit lower than the fence, about 1/16, 1/8 lower than the fence. And the reason I make it lower is so it doesn't ride on the table, it rides on the fence, so it's just going to be a tiny little bit above the table top. So just a little bit lower, and then I have this piece of plywood here. Let me tell you the dimensions. So for my fence, this piece it's about 2 7/8 by 13 1/8. And then this one, it's 12.5 by around 7. And this is just from my old jig. I'm just repurposing. It's just a piece of plywood with a small block in here. And you will see what the purpose of this block is in a second. So the way this will work, this will be like this will be like this, and then this one, it's going to connect the two just like that. So then this one will be able to ride on the fence. To elevate, I don't want this, like I said, I want it to be just a little bit above the table, so I'll use a shim when I will screw it in. Oops, drop the shim in there. So I'll put the shim down like this and then just put this on it. So that way it's just a little bit above the tabletop. And I'll do the same with this one over here. And let's see. You see how it just rides in here? So now I'll just have to drive some screws on this side and then from this side onto that one. So we need to mark where we need to pre-drill. So for this one, this piece comes from here to about here, so we can drill anywhere there in the middle. And then for this one, this is kind of where we need to pre-drill. So I'm gonna go do that now. Actually, the countersink has to be on this other side because I'll be screwing it from the back. All right, I'm gonna put my shim over there. This goes like this goes like that, and we will screw it in place. So right now we have these two pieces, and it's time to attach our next piece. Moves. There you go. Try that. All right, that is good. And once I will put some paste wax, that should be beautiful. Now I need to attach this piece that we made. So this piece, it's going to go over here. And this block, it's gonna help when we're pushing this, it's going to help pushing it so it doesn't just rely on the screws we're putting in. So I'm gonna go and pre-drill a couple of holes in here just so we can screw from this side. Also, I'll make sure I put the spacer underneath. So this is the way it's going to go. I have a box in here that I messed up when I did the flocking. It was my first time trying flocking. So now I'm using it for testing things. As you can see, I tested that double spline in here. I tested another spline jig over here. So now we're gonna put one on this corner, see if this thing works. So our box will be sitting like that against there. And I really like this design because then we can bring it to where our blade is. I need to lower the blade. And let's see if you can see over there. Let me move you around. So here is our jig. It will ride on a fence. I do have to put some paste wax in there. And now I can bring it to my blade. And I can see how deep do I want that spline. Maybe I want it just about there. So now I know I'm good. Then bring the jig this way and get it closer. And because these things are not straight on the table, I made them a little bit like 1 inch above. Now I can look from under. Let me just bring you over here so you can see what I see. Let's say I want to put a spline right in the middle of this white stripes. I marked it. And then I can put that corner, the box into the spline. And you can see from underneath the jig, can you see over there? You can see our mark. And then as I move it, I think I need to move the camera even lower. Something like this. Now you can see exactly as I move the fence, where is it going to cut the spline. So something like that. So let's do a test run, see how it's going to look. So here is our spline groove that we made. I don't know why my camera is not focusing. And here is a piece of walnut that is 1/8 inch. And that it's going to be perfect. Come on, camera, focus. Perfect spline. Now, I really recommend when you put this together, you also use glue. Don't rely on screws alone. And that way the glue is really going to keep it in place and it's not going to shift. I've only used screws just because I wanted to kind of go quickly through it so I can film it, but I will take it all apart and use glue. Well, I already did it actually. And also I added a few more things. I just glued in these pieces right under these pieces over here. I glued in a couple of pieces of plywood, and the purpose for this is so I make sure these guys never shift. They stay in place and it makes them a little bit stronger and more secure. And then on the back here, I also glued this one small piece of plywood just to use it as a handle. So when I push the jig on the fence, I have something to grab onto it and it makes it a lot easier. So here's my spline jig. Very happy with it, and I think it's gonna do some good job.